good morning, everyone. So I don't have slides, so I will just cover a few points so to leave plenty of time for questions. And I was exactly where you are now, about 2 years ago, just starting to think about a good idea, a good process to be successful in an ERC grant. And I've started this project in October this year. So I will just make 5 brief points, so we'll have time after. And my first one is that it's definitely worth the effort. It's really a great bonus to your scientific career once you get awarded this project. You can attract a great team of postdocs and PhD students. You can really focus on one big project over 5 years, so that really gives time to think carefully and develop and create the foundation for good research. You can also negotiate with your university some relief of teaching. In my case, I was relieved of all my baccalaureate courses. Can also negotiate relief from some administrative duties. The expectation is that you can really dedicate a large amount of time on your research for 5 years. So my second point is that, of course, it doesn't come easily. So you need to dedicate quite a large amount of time to prepare this proposal. And typically there are 3 stages. So the first one, the most important one, is just about generating that big original idea that will be successful. And I took about 1 year, and talking with colleagues who have been also successful, they told me the same. During about 1 year, you can keep thinking, okay, what would be a great idea? You test your idea, you bounce back your ideas on colleagues, and I will come back to that in a minute. So about 1 year for that. Then once you're ready, second stage is writing the proposal in this ERC format. I would say 2 or 3 months minimum. Of course, we can never work full-time on these things as academic with many other commitments. But for at least 3 months, 2 months, that was my main goal on every morning, just to advance in the writing of this proposal. And also I was able to start doing that almost 6 months before the deadline. So I was done maybe like 3 months before the deadline. So I could let this proposal sleep a little bit and return to it with a fresh eye. And that always allowed me to see some things I was not seeing when you're deep into the writing. And then the third stage, if you've been successful on step 1, then what's left is the interview. You need to prepare for the interview. This takes much less time because you know your stuff, but it's probably more stressful because you have no idea what they're going to ask you, and you realize this interview is really crucial for your success. Okay, we'll return to each of these phases now and give a bit more details. So first stage, generating the big idea. I think my main advice is to think big. You need to really come up with a new, bold, big ideas that will have a great impact on academia. But on the other hand, it has to be feasible. So we always know that's the trade-off. You can have many original ideas, but cannot test them. Many things can be tested, but they are not original. So what's the overlap between these two constraints? It's very important as you do that to always test your ideas through some literature review, and you will find that most of your great ideas have been done by someone already, maybe not in your little field, but from field that are slightly tangential to what you do, but some people will have explored that. It doesn't mean you cannot do it because they may have, adopt a certain perspective, but be very careful not to miss some key piece of literature on that. But also a way to test ideas is to talk to colleagues, talk to stakeholders, listen to what's being said and discussed and written in that space. I think it's very important at that stage to push you beyond your comfort zone. I think the evaluation panels really are looking for something that's outside, what you've been doing for the last 10, 15 years. It's not the incremental research that will be successful. It's really a departure from where you've been working over the last few years, as represented by your CV. So you need to take some risk as you do that. Then it's always a balancing act. You need to show ambition, but also focus. You know, a very broad, ambitious idea might be way too broad, not really feasible. So at one point, you need to identify, you know, what's exactly the contribution you're going to propose here. Then bear in mind also that these panels have people with very different backgrounds, different expectations. So some will look for your advance on theory. Others will look very carefully at your empirical experimental design. You know, others will ask whether you're collecting new data. So somehow you need to tick all these boxes to make sure you meet the expectation of whoever will be your reviewers. So that's for the first stage, so generating the big idea. And once you're there, now it's second stage. You need to communicate this idea in a very clear, convincing way to the panel and to the external reviewers. So that force you to really organize these ideas with a very clear research question, one or set of hypotheses, clear methods, work packages if needed. In that respect, my university offered the help of a consultant. You know, there are a number of consulting companies who help to write these proposals. This has been useful, but yet I would urge for some caution. You know, these consulting companies work with a series of kind of cooking recipes. You know, they have this standard canvas that they are always proposing. They force you to fit your ideas in this very rigid format. And as we know, you know, creativity generally does not fit well with this very rigid structure. So my consultant kept telling me, no, this is wrong. You know, this is not how you should read it or write it. You know, you need to use this format. In the end, I ended up ignoring that. And but yet it was very useful to have this feedback because it forces me to think carefully of why am I going to write that in my own way rather than according to this structure. So that's a very important thought process. Also, it's really important to do a very thorough and fair state of the art, state of play, because in addition to the panel, there will be external reviewers. So the panel members will act as journalists. Few of them will know really the details of your field, but they will send your proposal to reviewers who will be the top specialists in your field in the world. And they will really want to make sure that you are doing justice to what's been published in your area of research as part of your proposal, and that you make a fair account of what the literature is saying already. But keep in mind, this is your project. This is not a project of a consortium, so it has to reflect your own idea, your own personality, your own conviction. Because if you're successful, then you have to do that research for 5 years. So make sure that this is really something you're very keen to do. And then lastly, the third stage is the interview. And here the interview format really depends very much from one panel to the other. Some will give you 2 minutes of presentation, then questions. Other will give you 10 minutes of presentation. But just be aware that they will have read the proposal in depth, and they will have received very detailed comments from external reviewers. So in my case, I had 8 reviewers, so it was very detailed from very different disciplines. So they will read that. And so your task is really to defend the idea, to defend the content of your proposal. Some reviewers will have loved your proposal, but others will be very critical. And it's really the panel who will decide in the end. They will be influenced by these external reviewers, but they will make the final call, the final judgment. So it's not just about the content, it's also about displaying a good attitude, in the interview, in terms of research, of course, being energetic, open to new ideas, not too defensive, rigorous, informed of the literature. And also, you have maximum half an hour for these interviews. So it's important to have short answers so all panel members will have an opportunity to ask their question. You don't want to end with a list of questions that got unaddressed in these interviews. Okay, so here, just a few comments from my experience, and now I'm open for questions.
Sorry. Thank you very much for sharing your experience and your overview. We received one question. Maybe this question is more targeted to the ERCA, but you can for sure share with us your point of view. The question is, if the advanced grant is indeed a departure from previous work, in this case, can one propose a disruptive idea of which the PR does not yet have the absolute expertise, and that this would be developed during the 5 years of the grant at their lab?
Yes, and that's exactly what I did. You know, in my proposal, you know, there was, of course, it was grounded on something that's connected to my expertise, but I added a completely new application on which I knew absolutely nothing, as visible in my CV, except though that I had done a very small kind of pilot study on that field. And I think that helps, because if you can say, okay, you know, with one PhD student who had one chapter just venturing into that field just to test the water, we published that, not in a major journal, but at least I could refer to that in my proposal and say, okay, listen now, this is new for me, but, you know, we've tested this idea. It showed that it's promising. And I read that in the review reports, you know, at least 2 of the 8 reviewers had referred to that. Oh yes, he had some experience at least, you know, testing that new idea. But I think that's what expected, though, being disruptive, but yet being able to show that this is grounded in some of the expertise or knowledge you have or you have explored.
Thank you. Another participant is asking if you can maybe present in a few words your project or your idea.
Yes, so my expertise is on land use change. I worked a lot on you know, the causes of tropical deforestation, policies to control deforestation. And as I was reading that literature, I was realizing that one of the new driving force of land use change is the energy transition. So we are shifting from fossil fuel, nuclear energy to renewable energy, especially solar and wind. But the energy density of these energy sources is orders of magnitude lower than nuclear energy. You produce much less energy per hectare, and therefore you need much more space. And therefore, as you see in your landscape in Belgium and elsewhere, you know, there's this encroachment on cropland, forests, biodiversity-rich areas of solar fields and wind farms. And this is generating social opposition to the deployment of these energies. And in some cases, it generates trade-offs between biodiversity, landscape preservation, and the energy transition. And so, yes, so the idea proposed is, you know, how to evaluate the implications on land use of this renewable energy transition, and what scenarios of deployment, you know, centralized versus highly decentralized, would be most likely to minimize these trade-offs and maximize social acceptance.
Okay, thank you. And finally, another question is, would you need preliminary data if you have a complete new idea?
I didn't, but in my proposal, I had identified some existing databases. So of course, you always find this big database somewhere. You know, now that I'm studying the research, I realize that they are not really adequate, that I cannot really rely on it. But still, having mentioned them in the proposal means that I've shown that this research is feasible, it's tractable. I've made the effort for looking into, you know, the feasibility of doing this research. So I would say you don't need the actual data, but you need a path that will lead you to this data, because that's key, of course. You know, it's not only is it a great idea, but is it feasible in 5 years?
Yeah. Thank you. In the meantime, we received 2 other questions. The first one is, did you try the same code several times, or was it your first try successful apply?
First try, you know, it's possible. But I have to say, I've been part of an evaluation panel several times before, and that's hugely helpful, because you're sitting there, you read dozens of proposals, you participate to these panel meetings, so you really get a good understanding of what works, what doesn't work, what kind of questions come, and what's the level of understanding of the panel members in that field. So that really helped. But yes, otherwise, first time, so yes, go for it.
Thank you. And the final question is, how do you need to substantiate your development of new knowledge or new methods of new area of inquiry? For example, hiring a PhD in that field with a COP supervisor in that field, following a course to acquire new competence, or there is no need to do this. You can simply sort things out.
I would say the latter. I think just, yes, go for it and be bold, take risk, but be very convincing. I would be a bit careful about co-advisor. I remember when I was panel member, you know, this is really a funding scheme for you as a scientist, for you as an expert, not for a team, not for a consortium. Of course, you don't know everything, so you may rely on subcontracting for some small element of your proposal, maybe some very technical aspect. You don't have the machinery in your lab. But you know, the panel has to feel that this is you as a top scientist who's coming with a great idea and who really wants to develop that with your team. So yeah, I would just you know, sell your success in your past career in your field and the quality, the originality of the idea you're proposing.
Okay, thank you. And maybe we have 1 minute for the final question. How and how much did you tune your proposal for your panel? Did you choose the panel early or waited for a mature proposal first?
Well, in my case, it was kind of obvious that it would be that panel. So, you know, I was not falling between two panels. So that was from the start my choice. But I take this opportunity to address a question that was raised before. You know, when I was a panel member, sometimes, you know, so we have the 3 days meetings, we have to read 80 proposals and rank them and then identify the top 5. And then on the last day, suddenly we get a request from another panel. Oh, by the way, could you look at these 2 proposals because they mention your panel as a secondary interest? I have to say, in my short experience, this has never been successful. You know, we're working so hard just to rank our own proposal, and now you get these extra proposals that are kind of marginally connected to your own panel. So in most cases, we just say, oh, no, just send them back to that initial panel. You know, we cannot handle them, and they would not be ranked at the top of our own panel because they are just marginally connected.